seeking that help, and before you know it, they're not. The massive one is not opening envelopes, not opening letters, leaving them, just ignoring them, and that happens over months. But over that months, people become so anxious, get so depressed about that situation, and what becomes a small molehill it can fast become a mountain. It's very, very common in mental health services where people are struggling financially, and that's how I met you guys at Money Support Group.
Hi, this is another episode of Money Matters with me, Jonny, and this week I'm joined by Nick Alderson, mental health, shall we say expert? Is that fair to say?
Well, so that's a fair statement. I don't know if you can ever be an expert in mental health, but we try his best, don't we?
We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm a self-proclaimed expert in everything, and to be an expert in mental health in these times is a very, very a big thing, I'm sure. So, without being so vague, then Nick, if you could introduce yourself personally and what you do and who you work for, that would be absolutely smashing.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Alderson. I work for Lancashire Care NHS Trust, and I'm the Rural Development Officer for the Community Prevention and Engagement Team. So there's a lot of big words there for big services. So basically, in a nutshell, what my job is community development, so creating projects that people can access to benefit their mental and physical well-being. And the service I work for is a social inclusion service, and they support people who are perhaps in crisis to access community activities, peer support groups, colleges, just to aid their recovery with the mental health problems alongside clinical services.
Oh, really well put, actually. And just to touch on the services to help, could you elaborate on a few of those?
Sorry?
Services to help. So you said you work on services to help people. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to add with that?
Yeah, so we work alongside like the main mental health services, so like the crisis team, the community mental health team, the older adults team. We'll work in conjunction with these services for the best outcome for a patient. It's very person-centered.
Yeah, well, very good, very good. I mean, generally speaking, then, how would you see or think? Well, you could elaborate. How would you describe the mental health crisis during the pandemic? Is it been an astronomical rise like we all imagine, or is it a bit more nuanced than that?
Yeah. Well, as part of my role as well, I've been doing it over time at A&E due to the pandemic and the numbers, coming through to A&E. And at first, during the first wave of lockdown, it was very quiet, which I was quite surprised about. But it was that fear of accessing hospitals in general at that point. So it was a little bit of a calm before the storm, but we're most certainly seeing the storm now at hospitals as physical cases of COVID have gone down. Mental health cases directly impacted by or caused by COVID have gone up quite astronomically. We're seeing people who perhaps never accessed mental health services before in their life, now having to access services on a regular basis. And we're seeing a lot of males, particularly between the age of 25 and 40, who are accessing services because of losing jobs, relationships breaking down, losing homes. And like I said, these people have probably never accessed services before. So we are seeing a real wave of a mental health crisis at the minute, I would say, yeah.
No, yeah. Again, it's really terrible, to be honest with you. And I guess I suppose, like you say, you touched on it a bit there. There's breakdown of relationships, loss of jobs. I suppose the lockdown as well being something none of us really have experienced in our lifetimes. I suppose do you think in many ways with mental health crises like this, it is almost a cumulative effect, the unknown of the lockdown, and then something else breaks down and suddenly you just don't feel like you know where you stand anymore and what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, a clinical psychologist put it very, very, summed it up really well to me, where they said, if you can get through this COVID spell, pandemic spell, however long it lasts, you'll get through anything. And if you can't, and you've had to get help, don't be ashamed of that, because 95% of people are going to do that. 95% of people are going to have to reach out and get some support, even if it's just from a friend. It doesn't have to be a mental health service, just to turn around and speak to a friend and say, you know what, I'm struggling at the moment. Is there any chance we can, have a phone call? Zoom became very popular over the pandemic. It's just reaching out, and a lot of people fortunately feel like they can do that.
Yeah, no, there's no pressure can really put on speaking out and being able to discuss things, particularly personal things. And if there's one thing that's good out of the pandemic, it's like you said, the ability that people have managed to probably arguably communicate in many ways as much as they ever have with the likes of Zoom, with the likes, because I suppose you used to take that social interaction for granted, and now
Yeah,
obviously when you're locked away, you realize how much you really need it. And like you said, Zoom has been a blessing. You touched on it actually. You touched on lots of men actually coming out and being, you know, coming out to talk and expressing the feelings. And if you go back a decade or two, a bit further even, but even just 10 years ago, there was a stigma, wasn't there, towards this kind of, you've got to have
absolutely.
this masculine image, you've got to have the stiff upper lip, and it was really quite toxic, that. And I guess now, even though we've still made so many waves with mental health, you're still going to have a lot of people that question the validity of mental health when you get certain levels of certain diagnoses, shall we say, that they don't understand. I think rather than educating themselves about the diagnosis, the first response is often, oh,
Mhm.
well, what's that? It must be a load of rubbish.
Mhm.
Do you still think there's a long way to go in? I'm thinking more in less economically developed places and places where education's maybe not quite um,
Mhm.
as strong. Do you think there's still a long way to go before we have a full, complete nation behind and completely understanding mental health and all of its nuances?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is still that stigma there, but from my opinion, it is only getting better. It is only getting better. Services are getting better. There is actually more funding for services becoming available due to the period that we've been through. But what I will say is, a lot of my friends have said to me before, oh, anxiety and depression, do they exist? Do they exist? Pre-lockdown, pre-COVID, and they are lads. And since the COVID pandemic, some of these people who are my friends who know that I work in mental health, they've called me and said, can I just have half an hour of your time, just to have a bit of a chat? And they've reached out. So they are getting a bit more uh, understanding of what other people may go through. And they've had to reach out themselves. And that's good. It's good. Because people feel comfortable to do that. But yeah, there still is that stigma there. But it is getting better. It is getting better.
I feel like it comes down to an understanding thing in many ways, and understanding only comes from experience, whether that be from personal feeling or whether it's someone else who's felt it. So again, there is an ignorance, I think, often that many people work 9 to 5 or work busy hours, and they don't have the time or the not necessarily the time. I think everyone can find the time, but they don't have the want or desire to really bring themselves up to date with things and the way the world moves and the way things change. So it really, like you say, it does come down to, you talked about your friends there
Mhm.
who were suffering themselves because they
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to chat to you, or if
Mhm.
they've seen someone else suffer, and then they themselves then don't take it for granted. They do become aware, and sometimes you need to feel that experience, I think,
Yeah,
to really understand, the concept and everything about, well, not everything about it, but have a surface level understanding of
yeah,
the mental
yeah.
health thing.
There is also people have also said to me, I'm quite worried about a friend, or I'm quite worried about my brother or my cousin, and they say, well, I don't know how to approach it. I don't. And they say, well, what would you do? And I said, the best advice I can give anyone who is worried about anyone is just reach out anyway. Don't worry if you're gonna think that you're gonna make them worse, or you're not qualified enough, or you're gonna upset them. Just reach out, because do you know what? People actually do want to get better, and they do want people to support them. So if you are worried about someone, just reach out. Don't worry about anything else. Just make that first move, because people will appreciate that.
No, they absolutely will. I think again, rather than worrying about what might go wrong, it's about thinking about what you can actually offer. And it's, I suppose, it's glass half full, glass half empty mindset, isn't it? Really,
Absolutely, yeah.
in that sense. But whether being passive or active, often much better to be active and on the forefront. In terms of financial things, then. Well, I suppose the question I always think, and I suppose it's going to be a mix of both, but when it comes to mental health, is it, thinking the chicken and the egg situation, is it a bad mental health perspective then leads to bad money use or bad financial use, or is it actually the other way around in terms of a bad financial decision in some capacity then leads to an increase in a person's mental health issues? Which way around do you often see it, or is it a blend of both, really?
I'll be brutally honest, it's both. It's absolutely both. They both have a massive detrimental effect on each other. What we tend to see is people who have become in financial difficulty, really, they're a little bit embarrassed about seeking that help. And before you know it, they're not, the massive one is not opening envelopes, not opening letters, leaving them, just ignoring them. And that happens over months. But over that months, people become so anxious, get so depressed about that situation. And what becomes a small molehill can fast become a mountain. It's very, very common in mental health services where people are struggling financially. And that's how I met you guys at Money Support Group. So we've got a lot of people who come through our service who need that financial support. Although we can help with mental health, we don't have a clue about financial support. And luckily the team there are happy to take referrals from ourselves, and the feedback's been great.
That's really, really good. It's always, I think, the team at Money Support Group do their best to help people in those difficult financial situations, as you say. Sometimes led by mental health, sometimes pushing into a severe state of mental health. I think. It is challenging, I suppose. And I suppose when I always get a question as well asked and looked at, really, in terms of if you've got mental health problems that do affect your day-to-day life at quite a severe rate, then obviously that's going to be a problem for money handling anyway. So just from your point of view, I know you're not a financial expert, and the same for me, really. Well, I mean, not the same for me, of course, but the same for many other people. What advice would you give to people who, for budgeting, if they've got severe mental health problems?
Well, usually, if people have got severe and enduring mental health problems and they are struggling with budgeting, if we were to come across that person, we would perhaps refer them into a community living skills service where they will be allocated a support worker who can help with that. If they do want independence, like most people do, and we would most certainly refer them to an organisation like Money Support Group for that one-to-one support, not just with budgeting, but also just general awareness of money. Because what we see is people are very impulsive with mental health problems, and they will spend money very quickly, and they're leaving themselves very short for bills and food. And it happens all the time. And then there is that regret, because that release of spending money and buying something new gives them a nice feeling, especially if they don't have many nice feelings a day. But then that can quickly become a bad feeling when the bills come through. So I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because you don't want to take people's independence away from them, and enforce budgeting skills on somebody. But if somebody needs that support, we would find that for them.
Really well put, actually. I don't think I can really add too much to that, really. I suppose these are as well, you can say this is the first time I've actually done a Zoom interview for Money Masters / Money Support Group at home, and you can probably tell because there's a microwave in the background, and it's one of those situations, really, where you do crave the office. Unfortunately, I wasn't in today, and I probably should have been. Well, no one's in today. Just for clarification, I'm not actually skiving. No one's in today, but again, I do wish I was when I was conducting this. Anyway. I'm just going to go back to the point, like you were saying, in terms of budgeting and whatnot. I guess I can completely understand where you're coming from there as well with the independence thing. It's one of those. I'm listening to the microwave. I just heard it pop off again. I wonder what's in there. So I'm going to keep this in for just to show how authentic I am as an interviewer and what I do with these things. Back to the topic at hand, and it was something I was thinking. That's the one. Ping. The ping in the microwave's gone. Ping in my brain's gone. So. Education, really, really big thing, and I think a lot of, and I always talk about both from a mental health and a financial side. I think it's quite sparse, really, and I feel that in situations where people who have bad mental health problems often preyed on by payday loan companies and people who don't really care about the welfare of these people, but just care about essentially how much money they can make. Do you think more needs to be done to stop people who are clearly in vulnerable states from making decisions that they clearly can't mentally understand themselves?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it's a tough one, you know. People who are in that situation, like you say, are vulnerable, and there will always be people who want to take advantage of people. That is the world we live in, unfortunately. But there are schemes where we can start to educate at a lot earlier age now, where people are going into schools. I must say, there's a lad called Sam Tara who works for our trust, who fronts change talks, who goes into schools and talks quite in depth about mental health to students, you know, and the work he's doing is amazing, and the outcomes that we've already seen from Sam's work is amazing. But like you say, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. There'll always be vulnerable people to be taken advantage of, unfortunately. It's about finding that support for them early,
Yeah,
and supporting them if they do reach out for
yeah.
help.
Just talk a bit about Sam's scheme. Then you touched on it there. Is there anything specific that you particularly like about it? I'm sure it's a brilliant scheme, but
Yeah.
more detail.
Well, I've got two teenagers, which can be difficult, as every parent will know.
Especially
And
working from
there are
home.
yeah, and I mean, and I've worked in mental health for a long time. I won't say how long because people work out my age, but I've
No.
worked in mental health for a long time. And there are some subjects that even I would feel uncomfortable speaking to my daughter or my son about.
Okay.
So instead of that going amiss, what I will say to them is, have a look on Change Talks. You know, have 5 minutes on there, just read through. And also, Sam's going into schools and talking to children my son and daughter's age about subjects like drugs, alcohol, everything that can have an impact on mental health. And the work that he does is amazing. I think he's been nominated for a few national awards from that.
Very good.
Yeah, if anyone gets a chance, please have a look at Change Talks.
Yeah.
Just Google Change Talks, it'll come straight up.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
No, that's smashing. It sounds like a really good thing. Well, not just what you do, but of course what Sam does and what you all do. Really, I think it's outstanding. In terms of, I'll just nip back to the education point. And you're right, there always are going to be vulnerable people, but from a financial standpoint, and I always ask this question really because I ask my friends, I ask people in these interviews. I don't believe with our school education that we are adequately set up to deal with the real world in many ways. I actually think about that from a political standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, and for relevance from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's something that can't just change with a click of the fingers and then everyone's suddenly clued up and knows what they're doing and sorts out their own accounts and everything like that. I don't think that's realistic. But is it something that you'd like to see maybe in the next, I don't know, 10, 15 years, that there is systems in place to make people, when they leave school, a lot more equipped to deal with the struggles of day-to-day life that adults encounter?
Yeah, you made a really good point there, Jonny, and it's quite strange because I literally had this conversation with my daughter on the way to school this week. So my daughter on the way to school this week said to me, like most teenagers do, "Oh, I've got mathematics today. I hate it." And I'm like, "Well, Daisy, you know, you need to do it because you want to go to, you know, college." And she said to me, "Well, what's the point of doing Pythagoras theorem when I'm never going to use it again, but I don't know how to pay bills?" And at that point, I said, "Well, you don't know, you don't need to pay bills yet because we pay bills, you know. You don't need to pay, but don't worry about bills." And then when she got out of the car and I was driving off, I thought, she's actually made a really valid point there. She's made a really valid point. They were teaching me Pythagoras at school. That's not moved on. I've never used it from school. I've never used it. I used it maybe in an hour exam to get a grade.
Yeah.
But it's a great point. I can't see why we're not teaching these life skills to our children and preparing them for the outside world, because some children don't access education from high school. Some go straight into jobs, not through even choice, just through circumstances at home or not being academic enough to follow on education. They will have to get a job, but they will not know how to like you say, budget or pay bills or work things out financially for themselves. So yeah, it's an excellent point. And when I came away from speaking to my daughter about that, I thought, yeah, I'm actually going to have to apologise to her later and say, yeah,
did you? How are you going to apologise? Or
no.
No. Can't do that. Can't do that. No.
But it was a great point.
Yeah, apologise to her when she's old enough, when she's an adult, and then
Yeah.
it's all said and done, all forgotten. But no, and it's really quite perceptive of it to think like that, actually, because I didn't at that age. I was bashing through Pythagoras' theorem, thinking, "Oh, this is fun," but then obviously, like you say, you don't, do you? You don't. And I mean, it's not necessarily doing lots of different new exams that are all based around life skills. I suppose it's about, you could even implement it into certain subjects right now. For example, English, writing about writing arguments on general things that matter in the world, as opposed to writing about whether, I don't know, whether they should teach Spanish at school, something quite trivial like that. What about talking about something that matters a lot more, something that's relevant in current affairs, and getting people thinking like that? Same with maths, getting people, as opposed to just rewriting the entire exam, maybe just have 10 questions at the start that are all about setting up an account or working out how much this is, or working out budgeting tips, just having a bit of an emphasis on that, really. It's setting up for a sustainable future, as opposed to having to educate yourself, re-educate yourself after education, which really shouldn't. I mean, obviously you can always re-educate yourself, but there should be a level in place where you don't have to start from scratch, at least. I suppose, Nick, so you've been doing this for a while. We don't want to elaborate on how long you've been doing it for vanity reasons. But I suppose, what's the best or your most proudest achievement since you've been doing this role? I imagine you've got quite a few.
Well, I mean, the best achievement that I've seen is I was supporting a gentleman who had quite severe injury and mental health problems. He'd not worked for 10 years. He came along to a community project that I was facilitating at the time in Colne. And he came the first week, and it was a community garden. He didn't want to touch any plants. He said, "I don't want to touch any plants. I will, I'll basically kill them. I just want to dig." So I said, "Well, that's fine. As long as you're here talking to other people, getting that social inclusion, that's fine." So he came along. And after about 3 months of purely digging, he said, "You know what? I might take a sunflower on this week if that's all right." And I said, "This is great. Take it. That's great. You'll be able to look after it at home, get some skills, some patience and some commitment to that, working with that plant." So he did that. After a few weeks, he took a few strawberries home, and then before we knew it, he had a pop-up greenhouse at home, which were great because he'd come from not touching anything to that, and that were a big achievement. But then as time went on, he became more and more involved in the sessions. His confidence grew. He began taking other volunteers under his wing.
Back on for the 768th take. So essentially, Wi-Fi went. Family still have a landline. Living proof that the Flintstones was based on a real life family. Hello. And I do think they should move on to mobiles, or at least use them more often. Very frustrating. But on the bright side, I got a coffee. I didn't even realize that was there. It just appeared after like magic. Like the flower that you were just discussing, like the sunflower, Nick. You see that?
Yeah.
It's a good seamless transition back to what we were just discussing. And that's fantastic. So in essence, you got cut up halfway through the story, but I think you were basically going along the lines of, this was a man who was really low on self-confidence. You gave him sort of a purpose with relation to flowers. He ended up growing a lot of his own as a hobby.
He ended up growing at home, and then
growing
a
home.
few months later, he come to the project, and he looked like he was going to cry. And I said, "Is everything all right?" And he said, "Can I have a word?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I can't come to the project next week." And I said, "Well, that's all right. Is everything okay?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I've got a job." And I said, "Well, that's amazing. It's amazing." I said, "That's great." I said, "But where is it?" And he said, "At Burnley Football Club." And he was a massive Burnley fan.
I'm a massive Burnley fan.
And I said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "I'm working with the green staff, and we're doing the green space at Gawthorpe." And I said, "Well, that is amazing, because a lad who wouldn't touch anything green, he's now working for his football club doing the green spaces."
Yeah.
And that beat that is my all-time favourite moment. Him after 10 years getting that job is beats national and regional awards. That is the best moment that I've had in this job.
Smashing, and it sounds so good just to see that personal rise from someone else. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And generally, just then, what with the people you're working with your team, what do you forecast for the rest of the year, and what do you hope to achieve in the next few years?
Okay, so what I forecast a lot of people wanting social inclusion within our service, because I think the art of that has been lost a little bit. We're seeing a term come up now where people have actually got anxiety from lockdown about, you know, reconnecting with people. So that anxiety about reconnecting with people face to face, there's a lot of anxiety there, particularly in younger people who've spent a lot of time on technology, talking to friends rather than face to face in schools or, you know, out of school. So we're seeing a lot of anxiety there. In terms of achievement, I think we've just got to do what we can do. You know, as most people know, the pressures within the NHS, particularly in mental health at the moment, are very vast. There's a lot of staff burnout. People have been redeployed to different areas to cope with the pandemic. So there's been added stress on themselves and their families. So we've all got to stick together. We've all got to have a bit more understanding about each other's own personal circumstances. And just hopefully in a year, this will all be a distant memory. We'll be back living life as we should be. People will be able to do things that feel normal. But more importantly, services will be able to support adequately people who need help. So yeah, that's the hope.
That's smashing. Well, I think I speak on behalf of the whole of Money Sport Group and definitely myself in terms of saying, well, good luck with everything that you do aspire to do in the next, in the short term, in the long term. I think you do a wonderful job. With everything that you have done, and that story that you just discussed in particular not too long ago about the man who now works at Burnley Football Club, I think that's really touching and adds a bit of authenticity to everything that you do, because I suppose you do see so many individuals, and it shows that you really do connect with a lot of them, and the way that they rise out of the difficult moments that they're in. So absolutely love talking to you, Nick. And you know, and like your friend who's at Burnley Football Club, who'll be cheering Burnley Football Club on next season. So will I. So that's hopefully we can. That will certainly be a nice way to start to go into the year, new year. Hopefully, seeing Burnley challenging for a European spotlight did a few years ago, but we shall see. But anyway, smashing. Thanks for talking, Nick. Wish you all the best for yourself and Money Sport Group. And thanks for listening, everyone.
Just before I go, Jonny, really quickly, I've just come across this morning and I think it's fantastic, and I've got to tell you about it. And if anybody you know watches this, so there is an app that has just been released called Hub of Hope. I don't know if people have come across this before.
Hub of Hope.
It's an app that people can download onto their phones, and basically it's a national database of support for mental health in your area. So if you are thinking, I don't know where to go for this help, because a lot of people want that help but don't know where to go, getting a GP appointment, speak to a GP is pretty impossible at the moment. So if you download the Hub of Hope to your phone and type in your postcode, you will get a database of support and services in your area that you can access almost instantly. So if people are struggling, please download that and get some help.
Hub of Hope.
Hub of Hope.
On Apple and Android?
On Apple and Android.
Fantastic there. You're not a shareholder in Hub of Hope, are you, by any chance?
I'm not actually, no, I'm not. I wish I was.
That was a good opportunity, wasn't it? But yeah, no, it sounds like a really good app. And yeah, that could be the last words of this interview. Download Hub of Hope. Because it'll probably help you out if you're in a very difficult situation, suffering personal hardship and not knowing where to turn. Hub of Hope. Okay, thank you. On that note, take care, stay safe, and hopefully you listen to the other interviews that are on the way. So see you later, everyone, and thanks for listening. Well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to smash the like button, give us a nice comment, and most importantly, hit the subscribe bell. You hit the subscribe bell, it means you can keep up to date with all of the latest features that come on this channel, whether that be Money Matters or something else associated with Money Support Group. Hit the subscribe bell. until next time, thanks for listening, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your week.